So what we're going to do next here in our project is we're going to create a private method in order to separate out where our create params are going to live, so that when we're inserting information into our database, we can prevent certain kinds of information from coming into our database that we don't want. Something like SQL queries or other queries or code for the database, so on and so forth. So that's what we're going to work on now, and that's going to provide a level of protection, but not every level of protection. There are other things we need to do to protect our code sets or code bases, like validations, testing, authentication and authorization frameworks, that sort of stuff. So this is just one layer of protection, and it's called strong params. All right, so I'm going to teach you about the private method inside of for Ruby. The private method creates two different sections in any class in Ruby. Right now, all of these methods that we can see in our class are called public methods. That is to say, if you call on an object and that object has access to this class or is made from this class, or is a view that's associated with this class, then it can use any of these methods that we want, and you can use them anywhere that this class is called upon. A private section of the class, though, can only be called upon, can create code that's only called upon by the public section of our code. So no one outside of this class, quite literally right now, outside of lines 20 through 2, have access to anything inside of this private section. So private is very helpful for hiding information away from users or from other classes or from the application, and especially from being hacked. What I'm going to hide here is I'm going to hide the accessibility of params away from this create method, so that only things I want as can be sent over as params that I explicitly declare. So we're actually going to cut that out. We'll come back to create here in a minute. And inside of this private section, I'm now going to create a custom set of code that can be named, and I can call on it in the public section. And that's going to be a method called hike params. This setup right here is called strong params. Or at least what we're going to set up here is called strong params. I'm going to just bring in some info about private method, which is essentially what I said. Inside of strong params, I'm going to call on this special keyword here, params, which is, again, built into Rails. This params is something that Rails recognizes as information being sent over inside of a request. And I'm going to append to my params a special word called require. And require is going to look at an exclusive an exclusive set of data that's being passed over. And it's going to look at the model that I passed to require, in this case, hike. And I'm declaring this model using its identifier, which is a symbol. Remember, symbols are these weird collections of characters, i.e. a string, or these weird strings that represent identification of another thing. And then I'm going to pass to require permit. And this lets Hike, the class, know only the things we're letting through. Nothing else is allowed to come through into this controller. And permit is going to take the items that I'm allowing to be edited, and specifically name and description as symbols. Only these things can be edited when we're utilizing hike params. Now, does this prevent me from sending over a certain kind of string or unlimited string or something like that? No, it lets me send in name and description, but it doesn't let me send over a column name that doesn't yet exist. And that's what somebody can do with a SQL injection. They can send over a column name or a set of SQL that will create new information and return that information to us. And so only these things are allowed to be updated, and they're just supposed to be saved. Nothing is supposed to be responded to. Very nice. Okay, this is one step of a layer of protection. This is not everything. But now that I've clarified the parameters of the params of names and description, I don't actually have to re-clarify it anywhere. I can just call on this method and pass it right here. Yahtzee.
Now that doesn't return anything to the person who tried to do it, right?
The most this will return is a 200 and a payload of some HTML if we set it up that way. So just a status code.
I have a question, Austin. The symbol hike, does that pertain to the instance variable or the controller?
This pertains to the class of hike. This is a symbol that identifies any possible object that hike might be. So you can imagine like hike, curly bracket, ID thing, name something, description something, curly bracket. So this would work, by the way, outside of here in the create. The problem is that somebody would actually have users actually have access to this code through some complicated processes. They actually have access to this code and they can manipulate this code if they want. They cannot access this code and they cannot manipulate this code whatsoever. And so since we're calling on this set of code here and they don't have access to it, there's no way to manipulate what's going into our application. It's pretty nice from this point. Okay, that is called the private method and strong params. However, when I create something or something is successfully created, we experienced this earlier, it didn't navigate back to the main page for us, and that sucks. Genuinely sucks that I have to go and delete something from the URL and then go back to make sure that I can see everything. So we're gonna want to set up something that's gonna redirect us, and that's gonna be a conditional statement. I want it to redirect me when things work, and I don't want it to redirect me when things don't work. So the conditional statement is going to start off with a particular idea. I want to redirect on the condition that there was valid data input into my database. Make sense? right? You gave me some stuff in a form, you hit submit, it worked, it was totally valid, redirect you. And I don't want it to redirect me, slash I want it to bring me back here if it doesn't work. And so what would and I have access to this variable hike. So what is the way we determine if something is valid in Rails or Ruby? Hot guesses, go.
True.
Equals true.
Equals true. That will give us a truthy value. I like that one, but any more?
Dot valid.
Is it valid? Isn't that stupid? And you want to know what's crazy about is it valid? Where have we seen the word valid before? Have we had a whole lecture on something called validations? What were validations about?
When we were running tests.
Okay, but tests to do what?
Prevent hacking.
Our spec.
Yeah, we were using RSpec tests to do what?
To make sure data that we wanted got into the database and others didn't.
Yeah, and what tool were we using to reject the other data? You remember this? That valid question mark calls on this model validations for us. So if we put these validations in our model, this valid is actually calling on all of those for us. And it's connecting all of that. It's connecting this info to our validations and making sure it got into the database. Ain't that something? Cool. If it's valid, what do I want to happen?
Redirect to the root page.
And what's my root? What's my my root pages called when it comes to their alias?
Hikes.
And what do I have to do with Rails when I give it an alias as a variable? Hell yeah. And what he said is redirects to, and he said root page, but I wanted to redirect to the hikes path. And yeah, redirect to hikes path. Isn't that fun? Am I the only one who thinks this is crazy?
Trying to absorb it all in.
But my point is, if you have a conditional where you're like, yeah, I just need this conditional to redirect when stuff is valid, then the answer is if valid, redirect this place. Versus having to come up with all of the parsing of the different document dot get URL from elements, all that kind of stuff. And if I don't want to redirect, or I want to redirect back around to this new input, where do I go?
New hike.
New hike what?
Path.
Yeah.
New hike payeth. Pretty cool stuff, huh? So we are preventing SQL well, we're starting the process of preventing SQL injections. This won't do everything for us, but this will start that process. We're also checking validations. So if we wanted to set up a validation, like you can only insert strings, you can't insert certain characters, that's a validation. No, no colon, parenthesis, capital letters or something like that. You could totally set that up in your validations if you needed to. Then we're going to redirect to hikes, and then and if it doesn't work, we'll redirect back to our new path. Fun stuff, huh? All right, let's give it a try. Need a hike.
Mount Fuji,
Need description.
Scenic.
mountain, Japan,
Nippon desu?
sure.
What's the name for Japan while you're in Japan?
Just Nippon.
Nippon. Okay. Wait, what happened?
It was an error.
Yeah, how do you know?
We're still on the same page.
And specifically, what's gone?
Our data
Which means we did what to get back to this page?
redirected.
We redirected. Okay, I'm a developer. I just made some sort of interaction with my project. Something didn't work. Where is the first place I go look when running a full stack application to see what happened?
Terminal.
Cool. Look at this. Let's read it together. Started post for hikes. Post is what kind of thing? Somebody else.
Verb.
Yeah, it's an HTTP verb. Started post for hikes. Processing hike controller. Is this the right method? Yes. Create is the right method. Parameters, authenticity token, filtered, name, Mount Fuji, description, scenic, mountain, Nippon, commit, add, hike. Completed 400, bad request. Interesting. Why is this a bad request? Talk to me, Rails. Action controller, parameter missing, param is missing the value, or the value is empty for hike. TF? Come on, man, I gave you the whole thing. I set everything up. And this is what's going on here. Right now, we just pulled in this hike params, which is looking for a set of information that it actually is trying to gain access to, but it doesn't have access to because we haven't given access through our new method, which is super weird. And so what I need to do is I need to give this access by saying at hike equals hike dot new. Hike dot new. If we weren't in full stack Rails, we were back in remember Ruby classes. Remember the good old days of Ruby classes, everybody? If I was to use dot new, what would dot new be doing?
Make a new instance.
Yeah, just make a new instance of this thing. But this instance of at hike doesn't have any name or description, right? So what are the values of name and description right now?
Nil.
They're nil, they're empty. But new's job is to do what?
Creating an item to insert in the database.
Sorry, my bad, new and new. What is this new's new job? What is the restful action of new? What's that job?
There's an HTML form for creating an item to insert into the database.
An HTML form. I can pass this variable with incomplete data over to the HTML form and then update that data. Isn't that weird? So I'm going to show you how to do that. We're actually going to go back to our new over here. And the way we do this, we actually don't need this URL hikes or local true. We need model at hike. The model is looking at the entirety, is looking at a class that utilizes this empty valued variable. And it says, okay, I'm going to assume that this empty value variable represents what is a potential class for this entire project. And so I'm going to build out the appropriate labels and descriptions, and then we'll have a submit button with it. That variable is being updated. Once that submit is hit, that variable is being passed through into this hike params. It's actually being passed in through here through params. That this hike, and Catherine pointed it out a second ago. She said, does this reflect a variable or a class? And I said class. I was kind of lying a little bit. It represents an empty value set of a variable, which is part of this class, which this is being updated with name and description, bouncing this information through this name back up to line 16, creating the data in our database. Yeah, whose brain hurts? Yeah, mine too. And I've been at this for 2 years. Okay, so what do you need to know specifically? There are multiple ways to do the form with, but when we're utilizing strong params and validations, the best way to go about the form with is to use the model argument. The way you handle that model argument is by creating an empty variable of your class, an empty object of your class, and passing it over. That's it. When these things are true, you just need an empty value of an empty object of your class and pass it on over to your form. Cool? That's a lot of movement, though. I'm not going to lie to you. That's even a lot of movement for me. So I went through this as well. It did not make sense to me. You're going to be okay. Okay. Let's run it. Name. What's the mountain that Naruto trains Sage mode on?
Mount Miyaboko.
Thank you. Miyo.
I can't spell it.
Hey, Mount Miyaboko. Lots of frogs are kind of big, scenic. Oh boy. All right, y'all. That's my time. Questions?
Can we do the whole lecture again?
Yeah. We can do the whole lecture again.